welcome to Don's Manufactory. And on goes the furnace. Yeah, we're still having cold weather here. The sun's supposed to come out sometime today or tomorrow. Anyway, so what I'm working on, I have finished my spring perches. They now have snap ring grooves and everything is reassembled. Zerk fittings for greasing them. I'm just going to clean them up and paint them now. But really nice. I mean, just really nice. I'll be tearing the car apart a bit more. My finger, the chunk out of my finger is starting to heal. I had to give it a couple of days. I heard from CJ Pony, and they asked me for pictures and a video of the defective parts again. It's been 3 weeks, and now they're asking me for all the stuff again. I don't know. Okay, so I have decided I'm going to go ahead and make Delrin bushings for the idler arm. So I just start with a chunk off that 1-inch bar that I bought for the punch and die when I was repairing the door latch reinforcements. And I've decided that I really need to make a mandrel when I'm working with Delrin. The jaws of the chuck tend to deform the plastic, and even though I'm boring a perfectly round hole, as soon as I take it out of the chuck, the hole's not round anymore. So here what I'm doing is I am turning the mandrel, the exact length I need for the bushing and the diameter I need it's the same diameter as the center shaft on the idler arm. The Delrin bushings are going to press onto that. So my idea is that I will start by boring a hole in the Delrin, and then I will cut it to almost the right length, and I'll face it, but then I'll press it onto the mandrel and then turn it to size. So it will be a press fit onto the center shaft and a nice bearing fit inside the sleeve of the idler arm. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. So setting it up and checking for concentricity here, and I'm just so now I'm facing it off, and then I'll turn it to dimensions. Okay, so I don't know how much of all this you want to watch. I mean, I have a ton of this time lapse of me going through the process of making this thing, but basically it's just a little mandrel. Okay, here you can see I'm bringing in the tailstock and the live center in order to stabilize the mandrel. And, you know, there's not a lot of rigidity in this little hobby lathe, so I needed to get as much rigidity as I could. And I'm just now turning the outside dimension down so it's the same as the shaft of the idler arm, or the idler arm bracket, I should say. Okay, here I am setting up the Delrin, and I'll just get it relatively close and, you know, get the measurement right where I need it. See, and I'm just going to whack off a chunk, and I'll do the same thing again because I'm making 2 bushings, one that goes in from either end. And then I set up, try to get it as concentric as I can, which is hard to do because the jaw actually deforms the Delrin, as I said before, so the outside of it isn't round anymore. It has bumps all the way around. Anyway, so yep, bore the center and then stick it on the mandrel. Okay, so what I'm doing here is using a hunk of 5/16 drill rod and making another boring tool. I was using the 1/4-inch one before, but the 5/16 one will be a little more rigid, and I'm starting with a 1/2-inch hole, so it doesn't matter. It's not like it's not going to be small enough. Anyway, I watched Blondi Hacks. She was showing how she was making D-bits and how to turn them into bits, drill rod into bits. And so special thanks to her because boy, it really works good when you grind them the way she does. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I have now placed the shall we call it a bushing blank, onto the mandrel. I'm setting up concentricity using the shank of the mandrel, so now I know that the center is going to be perfect, and then I can just turn the outside of it right to dimension, and it will fit perfectly. This is a way better way of doing this than the way I was doing it before. And notice, yes, I'm bringing in the live center because I want things... somehow I ended up with some concentricity problems, and so I had to take the tailstock away because the center drill that I had previously put in there was not accurate. So now I'm running it without. I'm cutting plastic, so it shouldn't make a difference. You can really see how the Delrin just bundles up when you try to cut it. It just wraps itself all around the bushing there. But, you know, that's just the way it is working with this sort of stringy plastic. Reaching final dimension and checking it with the sleeve on the idler arm. As soon as it gets all just absolutely perfect, then first one is complete. Today I'm working on bushings. As you've been watching, I've got my first bushing for my idler arm turned. It is a press fit onto the sleeve like so, and then it is a 1/1000th clearance fit right here. 100,000ths shoulder on both ends. One of the things that I have decided I'm going to do here too, I'm putting it in the factory position, but because of the design of this thing now, I can adjust the idler arm up and down to match the pitman arm on the other side so that my center link is running parallel to the frame. So then the steering link will be parallel. I'll have equal angles and everything, and that should alleviate any bump steer. And because of the way I did these bushings, I can just shim this up and down. I suppose you could do that anyway with a even with the stock bushing in here. You could shim your idler arm up and down to set the parallelism, as it were, of the steering. All right, different view of the same process. This is for bushing number 2. And boy, see, this really shows how the Delrin just wraps itself around the work. It's amazing. Okay, again, reaching final dimension, making the checks with the caliper and the idler arm. Well, see, then I moved the setup, had to reset the concentricity because I ended up leaving the shoulder just too thick. So one of the things I did with this too, I noticed that I had a wobble in the lower part of the bracket. Now, the way this is working, it needs to have that shoulder that I'm working on right there needs to be perfectly perpendicular to the shaft that the bushing is going to run on. So I had to get in there and trim about 20 thousandths off of it to get a little wobble out of it. It's nothing that would have affected the original idler arm bushing, but it definitely affects this one. Okay, drilling and tapping the side of the idler arm for a Zerk fitting. Basically what I did was I made sure that the bushings did not touch each other when they were pressed in. So it left a gap in between the two bushings that grease could fill up right there where I put that Zerk fitting. Good morning, welcome to Don's Manufactory. I'm doing a little touch up on the idler arm today. When I put it all together, the Delrin bushings are the same length as the sleeve on the inside, and they actually need to be slightly shorter than that, just a couple of thousandths. So what was happening was when I was tightening the bolt down, which is supposed to lock the inner sleeve, it was then making the idler arm too tight. So what I ended up doing was I cut some sticky back sandpaper here, 220 that you'd use on a DA, and I cut the center out so that it fits over this shaft that I used, this tool that I used when I was turning the bushings. So this is the exact size of the inside of that steel sleeve. So what I want to do then is bolt this down and apply a little pressure, and then just rotate the idler arm and sand off just a couple thousandths worth of this Delrin off of this face, maybe a thousandths on each side, in order to make the sleeve stick out beyond the Delrin. By the way, the reason I ended up doing this is because I took apart my old bushing, which actually was perfectly fine, to check how it's made. The rubber inside the rubber bushing is only 75 thousandths thick, and there is no way that rubber that thin is going to stay attached to the outer sleeve turning 90 degrees, 45 left to 45 right. There's no way you're going to be able to turn it that far. So these things do not and are not supposed to help you center. That might have been true on some cars at some point. Power steering cars, they have a much larger bushing, which is what would be required. You'd have to have a thicker rubber sleeve in order to be able to essentially stretch the rubber that far. It's looking good. It really is. I can catch my nail on both of them. Okay, let's bolt her down again. Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. That is so perfect. No play, no drag. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm stopping right there. That is perfect. There we go. Did you see that? There. See, greased her up. Grease came out where it's supposed to. So basically, the sleeve, the Delrin is pressed onto the inner sleeve. So when you lock the inner sleeve, the Delrin stops moving. So the bearing surface is the Delrin against this outer sleeve. And it's perfect. There's no play in it at all. It's absolutely perfect, and it's just completely free moving. Wow. Cool. I think it's as good as any other solution. There's nothing wrong with the way those original ones are made. The rubber is not thick enough to cause too much deflection, and so it makes for a pretty tight feel. But if you think about it, it had quite a bit of drag still. It was not as free moving as this one is, but it was every bit as tight. But this one, of course, has less give, so it's not going to cushion rough things in the road. When something kicks the wheel, which kicks the steering linkage, it's going to kick the steering wheel, and maybe that's a good thing. Give me lots of steering feel, that's for sure. Wow, that is perfect. It really turned out super. Okay. Thanks for watching. Later.